the vast majority of entrepreneurs are really in a struggle for survival. And so when you're first starting out, chasing a revenue goal, doing something that is going to create some stability for you, it's everything. But at the same time, I think you can still do that while doing something that's exciting for you. Pretty much almost everything I've ever done has started with some level of curiosity or searching or wondering. I mean, my whole life has been kind of an act of curiosity. I
Yeah.
mean, when I was a kid, I was raised Catholic and my parents weren't super religious. So, and the Catholic church was confusing. And so I went on a quest and went to a whole bunch of different churches and religions and investigated from I think 13 or 14 until I was probably 17 or 18, maybe a little older. I think every business I've ever started has been from a place of curiosity to see if I could do it. Some of them were from a place of crisis, but then crisis created curiosity. And so that's the direction that I ended up going. But yeah, I think, intense curiosity is a very common entrepreneurial trait. I think that's where a lot of the solutions we see in the world come from. I think that's where a lot of success comes from is intense curiosity.
And has curiosity sometimes led you into trouble?
The whole curiosity killed the cat thing. I don't know. I'm 49, Ajit. And so when I look back at my life and I think oh man, what were the worst things that ever happened? I now have enough perspective to know that those biggest challenges, the biggest obstacles, the worst things that ever happened eventually became the things that needed to happen and the things that spurred change and moved me in a different direction. And so, I think the older I get, the more my wife always says divine timing and divine order. And the older I get, the more I believe in that. It's everything is unfolding as it should. And the more we trust that that's happening, the more we see the lessons in things, the more we see the wisdom that we gain from things. And so would I say that curiosity has ever led me astray? I don't think so. I think maybe in the short term, certain numbers or metrics were affected, but overall, I think even the greatest obstacles I've ever faced have been intense learning experiences that within a few years I can look back on and say, oh man, that had to happen. Maybe not had to happen. I'm glad it happened, even if it was one of the toughest things I've been through.
One of the things that you just said, divine timing and divine order. How do you sit with it when we talk about goals or dreams that we have? If it is divine timing and divine order, how do you sit, or do you even care about goals at this point?
No,
you do.
Yeah.
How do you do that dance?
Well, I think there's divine timing and divine order, and there's free will. And so, if we are free to pursue what we want, we're free to create the outcomes that we want. I am very goal-oriented, massively goal-oriented. In fact, I often joke that, I don't really like goal setting experts. I'm a goal achievement expert. And those are two completely different things, And so, I'm very driven. I think at any point in time, I'm working on a number of goals in my life, like physiology goals and spiritual goals, and definitely goals that are either financial or in a business. I don't just kind of coast and let things come as they do. But at the same time, as the world unfolds around me, I like to believe that everything that's happening is happening for a reason. My friend Sean Stevenson, who passed away a few years ago, was just an extraordinary human being. And he used to say, it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. Whatever it is, it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. And if you just look at the world that way, that how is this happening for me? How is this obstacle, this challenge, this frustration, this bankruptcy, this loss, this business closure, this broken relationship, whatever it is, how is that happening for me? What's the lesson here? I think it's just I hesitate to say it's a more enlightened way to live, but I think it's a lot more progressive way to live. It makes things a lot easier.
So, which is beautiful, by the way. And I love Sean as well. Had some great conversations with him. Amazing dude.
Yeah.
My curiosity is still sitting with the idea, and I'm asking this more as a reflection also for anybody that would listen, that would be yeah, I like to do goal setting. I like to get my goals, or at least I would like to achieve them. I do or I do not is a different thing.
Yeah.
At the same point of time, there is some level of surrender, I feel is what you're talking about. I don't want to say if it's easy or not easy, but it is a dichotomy in a way. Why do I need to chase if I believe in divine surrender and divine timing?
I think that every day for us is an opportunity. And I think when you look at the world around you, we have the opportunity to say, I want to change this about myself, or I want to grow in a certain way, or I want to help a certain amount of people, or I want to help a certain type of person. I want to leave my mark. I want to, have an impact. And I think those are the things that move us in a direction. And as we are challenged by obstacles, or as we have things that come up against us, maybe it's a form of surrender, but I also think, that the phrase that the obstacle is the way, and that when we're presented with a challenge, that as entrepreneurs, I deal exclusively with entrepreneurs. I work with people who consider themselves entrepreneurs, who have the entrepreneurial personality type. I wrote the book, The Entrepreneurial Personality Type. And I think for us, they say that, very few people take the road less traveled. Well, entrepreneurs don't even wait for a road. We see an opportunity, we see a change we want to make, and we pursue that change. And in the pursuit of change, if we can understand that the obstacles that come up, the issues that come up, those are if you believe like I do, those are exactly what we need to be facing in order to move forward. And so it creates maybe not so much surrender, but more acceptance of what's going on around us, and maybe gives us a different perspective of what's going on around us, instead of just feeling defeated or just focusing on the obstacle. It's, how do I get what I need to out of this thing that's in front of me?
Do you think it is almost important in some way to have that chase, to have those goals, to be able to orient ourselves to the opportunities and the challenges of life, or the obstacles that are the way?
I think it's crucially important.
How do you go about thinking about what should be that goal?
Like how do you create your own goals?
Yeah. How do you even know what's a right? The right goal might be a difficult thing to say, or impossible to ask, but what is the goal we should chase?
I think when you look at entrepreneurs throughout history who were wildly successful, they pursued something that was important to them, and that was a change they wanted to see. And I think that one of the reasons I kind of sometimes make fun of goal setting experts is they do things like, hey, Ajit, write down the biggest number you've ever thought about earning, write it down. Like, no, don't write it yet. Like, think bigger. And now that you have it down, cross it out and double it. And that's your goal for the year. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty myopic way of looking at growth. That's a pretty myopic way of looking at contribution, at what you're going to do, at the change you're going to make. When I have obsessively researched and studied successful people, and when you look at the vast majority of them, there was something very exciting about what they were doing. There was something that was enthralling about what they were doing. There was something that was very important to them about what they were doing. And so I think that often we get into this environment, maybe in the entrepreneurial space, where people are encouraged to look at top line revenue and how much are you selling and how many millions are you making, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. However, if it's to the exclusion of what you actually want to do, to the exclusion of what excites you, I know a lot of people who make a ton of money and feel very hollow and are frustrated with it. I have a podcast. We talked about my podcast. I have an episode called What to Do When Money Stops Mattering, because you get to the point as an entrepreneur where if you have enough money in the bank, you can't feel scared about money anymore, or you don't feel as scared about money. And it's not as motivating to have to build that resource, to have to build that backstop. And so I think, doing something that is personally intriguing to you creates wild success. And history proves it. History really proves it out. If you look at the people who have changed the world, if you go back through history and you think of the people you remember, the people who matter to be remembered, they were on a quest to do something. They were excited about what they were doing. And I think that's important. And I don't think that that's talked about enough. I think, there's a lot of people who want to put people on a path, or who want, again, like aim at a revenue number. If that's really exciting to you, then that's great. But what is it that you really want to see change? Who's it that you really want to help? I always tell entrepreneurs, if you're having trouble figuring out what direction to go, start with who you want to help. Like, what problem do you want to solve for people? What issue do you want to change in the world? And oftentimes that's incredibly motivating.
That's so powerful. And that's a very different and interesting way of looking at goals. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
My curiosity is, when we are approaching these goals, when we are approaching these directions, there is, at least from my point of view, and I'd love to be challenged on this and hear your take on it, is I feel there is a journey where it is a starting of an entrepreneurial journey, and that comes from desire to, yes, change something probably, but it also is a desire to make money and have the freedom while making money, more so. And this is kind of, let's say, arbitrarily putting it, let's say it's your first million, right? Is where you go, I'm going to just work my butt off because I want to get to this place and it's safe. And that's probably where all that goal setting comes in, where you go, oh, well, let's chase this, double number. And then you get to a safety level and then it stops to matter, kind of like what you said. I feel more entrepreneurs are in that stage of hitting security. They're not actually in a place of going further from security.
The numbers prove it out. Yeah. I mean, if you just look at the numbers, so these numbers are from a few years ago. They're pre-COVID, and we did a really extensive breakdown of the numbers. And so just a few years ago, there was 29.5 million businesses in the United States. 16 million were under $40,000 a year. So over half. From 40 to 100,000, there was 6 million. So 22 out of 29 million under 100K. From 100 to 300, there was 1.7. From 300 to a million, there was 1.9. So you take that totality, and under $1 million was about 25 out of 29.5 million businesses, a little over 25 out of 29.5 million businesses. And so, sorry, not 25, 26. And so the vast majority of entrepreneurs are really in a struggle for survival. And so when you're first starting out, chasing a revenue goal, doing something that is going to create some stability for you, it's everything. But at the same time, I think you can still do that while doing something that's exciting for you and doing something that intrigues you and doing something that you feel like gives you personal momentum. I think a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck because they're doing something that they don't really like. And they're climbing an uphill battle of not having the momentum of feeling like they're actually doing something that's exciting for them. Early on in the entrepreneurial journey, if you have clear outcomes and you have a clear process to follow, that can feel really good. But then so many entrepreneurs have businesses that grow and then recede, and grow and then recede, or they start going up the path of gaining higher revenues and then they have a hard time continuing. And I think a lot of that has to do with not really being lit up by what they're doing, not being excited about what they're doing. I think at the beginning of becoming an entrepreneur, when somebody says, hey, I want to do this, they're usually getting away from something. They're getting away from working for somebody else. They're trying to get away from not having the freedom they don't want, or that they want. They're getting away from not having enough money. They're getting away from not having enough status, feeling like they're not good enough. Like, those are the things that compel us at the beginning of our career, and then might come back later on. And then there's a second stage where it's, that doesn't need to happen anymore. You have enough money. You've proven yourself. You've put yourself out there. And then the question I think entrepreneurs need to start asking is like, what am I running towards? Because in the beginning, we're running away from. And that's compelling like crazy. I think for some entrepreneurs, it's there for their whole lives. They were bullied as kids. They had challenges with money. They came from a poor family. They never had resources. They never had what they wanted. And so that just compels them their whole lives. And they never get to the place where they say, wait a second, I don't feel this drive anymore. I don't feel this push anymore. Like, what do I do next? And I think that next is like, what do I really want to do? What do I want to change? What am I excited about? And if you can back that up, and in that process of running away from, you start asking yourself, like, what do I really want to impact? How do I really want to change things? I think it can lead you to maybe a more exciting path, or maybe a more compelling path. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It makes perfect sense. Apart from curiosity, or intense curiosity, as you call it, what are some of the principles, variables, or common themes that you work with like 80,000 entrepreneurs, like you said? Is there I've seen these consistent things that entrepreneurs either have, or they build it as a skill or harness within themselves, that one should look out for as they're building their own enterprises?
I think that there's a massive consistency in entrepreneurs. And I'm speaking for entrepreneurs. I've worked a ton with entrepreneurs. I've studied entrepreneurs throughout history. I've been able to work directly with and interview some of the most successful people in the world. And, I define the entrepreneurial personality type as a physiologically sensitive, momentum-based being that is highly reactive to constraint. And when I look at every entrepreneur, that's what I see.
Could you say that again? Physiologically, sure. What?
So it's a physiologically sensitive, momentum-based being that's highly reactive to constraint. And here's what I mean by that. As entrepreneurs, we are sensitive. We're physiologically sensitive, whether we realize it or not, whether we allow ourselves to understand just how sensitive we are. But for entrepreneurs, we feel things. The antenna through which we make decisions is our body. It's our being. It's who we are. And we are momentum-based beings. As entrepreneurs, when we're in momentum, when we're moving towards an outcome, towards a goal, when we're in that place where like we're knocking things down and the world's following in our wake and we're making things happen, it feels like we're alive. When I go out and speak, I'll ask, like, what does it feel like? And people say, it feels like I'm high. It feels incredible. It feels like flow. It feels like nirvana. It feels, like all kinds of other words. And then finally somebody goes, it feels like I'm alive. And for people like us, I think when we're in that pursuit of something, when we're in that moving towards something, that's when we feel fully engaged and alive. And so we're momentum-based beings. And then we're highly, highly reactive to constraint. So when something gets in our way, we go into massive constraint. Like, an entrepreneur can be having a great day, get up, things go well with their kids, they get on a sales call, they make the deal, they go out to lunch, they have a great conversation with a potential client, they come back to the office and there's an envelope that says IRS, and they instantly go into this reactive, like constraint-based, like everything's broken. Even before they open the envelope, they're having those feelings. And so we are highly, highly reactive to constraint. And so, in the work that I do with entrepreneurs, it's understanding that that's who we are. We're physiologically sensitive. Sensitivity for entrepreneurs is a superpower. I was recently coaching a company in Hong Kong that trains other people how to make money in the information products business. And I was working with one of the three principals and the person who helps them operate their business. And I mentioned to him, I said, I want you to realize how sensitive you are. And I could tell in the conversation that he took it as like an insult. I think a lot of us, when we're told, hey, you're sensitive, we're like, oh, I'm not sensitive. I'm tough. I can put up with tons. Like, let me show you everything I've done in my life. And I had to pause and say, like, hey, let me explain to you what I mean by sensitive. I mean, you are so sensitive that you've been able to build this business that does multiple $1 million that sells a product nobody else in the market saw. And you're so sensitive that you can put together marketing programs and packages that people buy like crazy because you see an opportunity nobody else sees. And as entrepreneurs, I think we deny our sensitivity, but what we don't realize is it is an entrepreneurial superpower. It takes sensitivity to see an opportunity nobody sees. It takes sensitivity to see a new product that can enter the marketplace where there's a gap. And so when I say that we are highly sensitive to constraint, I think one of the best ways for us as entrepreneurs to understand where to go is to understand what we shouldn't be doing and take away the static and the noise in our lives. I often talk to entrepreneurs about pressure and noise. When there's high pressure and noise in your life, and this can come from anywhere. And I take like everything that happens to us that doesn't feel like momentum, and I call it pressure and noise. So it's arguing with your wife. It's challenges with your business. It's challenges with your health, with physiology, with money, whatever it is. Where is the pressure and noise coming from? And how do we start making it go away? And how do we not accept all of that noise, all of that pressure? Here's what happens to us as entrepreneurs. I think operant conditioning is real with human beings. Like, the psychology has proven that if you feed a dog and you ring a bell, and you feed the dog and you ring a bell and you ring the bell without the food, the dog still salivates. Well, we're just the same. I mean, we're not exactly the same as dogs, but we're conditioned like the same thing. And in order to start a business and be successful, you do everything that conditions you that in order to be successful, you have to continue doing everything. And every entrepreneur, you, me, everyone who's ever had any level of success has been in a place where we have not had enough resources, not had enough time, not had the right skill set. We've been too young, too old, overqualified, underqualified, whatever the world was telling us. And we've been able to battle through that place. And that is, and we're looking at a light at the end of the tunnel, and the people around us are like, hey, that's a train. But we continue towards that light. We compel ourselves towards it towards us. And then we finally pass through it. And that's where we become who we are today. Have you been on that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
All of us have.
All of us. Yeah.
Right? The issue is that going on that journey actually conditions us to put up with all of those things. And there's a point in our careers where we can say, okay, and really earlier than most even think, where we can say, hey, what are the people, what are the places, what are the things in my life that are not giving me momentum because they're taking it away? And I think oftentimes entrepreneurs don't see the opportunity in front of them. They don't make the decisions to really get what they want because they're in this place of, I just have to put up with all this stuff, and that creates success. And so oftentimes it's by taking things away rather than adding them that massive momentum is created. If somebody's listening who feels like they plateaued, or they're not getting the results that they want, or they're not feeling like they want to, or they're creating success, but it doesn't feel like it used to, my question to entrepreneurs is, okay, so like, what else is there in your life that's creating pressure and noise that is taking the momentum away? Like, you're not even feeling the momentum of what you're doing anymore. And I think it's binary. The things in our lives, the things that we do, they either give us momentum or they take it away. And we like to say, no, there's this middle ground, but there really isn't. There isn't. If we're more defensive of ourselves, I think one of the biggest issues for entrepreneurs is we're not defensive enough of ourselves. We put ourselves into situations that are uncomfortable. We have relationships that are uncomfortable. We don't really tell people when we're uncomfortable. We put up with a lot, and we feel like, oh, this is what I need to do to create success. And I see the opposite, in the stories that I read of entrepreneurs who became wildly successful. There was a point in their lives, or maybe just a habit in their lives, of eliminating what made them uncomfortable, of not doing the things that they didn't want to do, of walking away from the systems or the structures that didn't feel right to them so that they could go do the thing that they wanted to do.
And I see that, and I see that for myself as well, as you say it. And this is a curious question, is if somebody, because I would think there are certain parts of my sensitivity I have turned down probably at this point, because of, I've lost that judgment, or not judgment, well, lost that sensitivity to that area because of whatever may have happened or what people may have said. And I may have felt, okay, maybe I just don't know enough about it or whatever, even if my sense said something. How is it that somebody reignites or develops or harnesses? Let's say somebody has some sensitivity, but they would love to harness it. Like, like all the other elements that are key to somebody's success. And I do think sensitivity, the way you explain, is absolutely paramount.
Yeah.
I think that's the cutting edge of an entrepreneur in many ways. That's the thing that makes it, because of their ability to be able to sense so clearly and be able to turn down the noise, like you said. So would you have any practices for that? Have you seen or worked with people to say, hey, listen, I feel like we need to work on this area, and here's how?
Yeah, we have a whole system for it.
Yeah. Would you like to give some highlights on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Ajit, one of the reasons that I sometimes make fun of or say, like, hey, be careful with goal setting experts, is because goal setting experts start from where you are and always push in this direction. And they say, here's where you are. Like, what else are we going to do? What are you going to do next? And what often happens is, or what doesn't often happen is, we don't ask, hey, what's in the way? What do we need to take out? What do we need to pull away? What do we need to exercise from your life so that this happens by itself? There's two ways to create momentum. If you think of a boat in the water, if that boat's carrying a ton of ballast and you can throw that overboard, it takes a lot less energy to get it up out of the water. Or you can just say, hey, I'm just going to go in this direction. I'm going to ignore how heavy things are, and we're going to use all the energy that we need. And so there's this other way to create progress in our lives that is not often talked about in the entrepreneurial world. And it's doing an inventory and figuring out, like, where is the pressure and noise coming from in my life? Like, where is the frustration coming from in my life? And we have a system that's part of our momentum planning system to do this, but I'll give you the highlights because anybody can do this, like just with the directions I'm giving you now. I often tell entrepreneurs, like, get up and go for a walk, and go for like a good 20-minute walk. It clears your mind. The bilateral stimulation gets you in your body, helps you think more clearly, and then sit down at a desk and say, okay, what are all the things in my life that are frustrating me? Like, for me, what are the things that are frustrating me? I'm not sleeping well. I'm frustrated with where I live. I've gained weight and I don't feel attractive, or I've lost too much weight and I don't feel strong anymore. Like, what are all the things that are bothering you in your life? And take an inventory. It only takes a few minutes. and write all those things down. And then do the same thing for, okay, here's my business. Like, what are all the things in my business that are bothering me? And then the third area is, what are all the things in my relationships? And oftentimes, if an entrepreneur is in a significant other relationship, if they're married, or if they have a person that they are with, then it's, what are the things in that relationship? I call them the three alignments. When you look at the three areas of an entrepreneur's life that need to be aligned, it's alignment with self, alignment with others, and then alignment with our business. And if you write all those things out, it can be incredibly revealing. In fact, for a lot of people, when I've gone through this exercise with people in person, I used to teach this in classes, people would write things down and I would say, okay, now that we've done this, and like in a live class, we would take maybe 3 minutes per category. I'd have everybody get up, go clear their minds, come back, and okay, let's take 3 minutes per category. And then at the end, I would say, okay, let's take 1 more minute and write anything down that came up that you haven't thought of. Like, just give yourself the opportunity. And then I would say, how does everybody feel? And at the end of just writing this stuff down, people would be like, I feel so much better. I feel so much lighter. I feel like, I have a different perspective. Nobody's ever asked me to do this before. And one of the reasons I have people do this is, I'm 49. I started as a consultant when I was 21, and I wasn't a coach. I wasn't like in this information products world that we're in. I owned a manufacturer's rep firm, and then we also did some consulting on the side. What I realized in that company was the executives I was working with, the people that I was working with, when they got stuck, oftentimes it wasn't because the destination wasn't big enough. When they got stuck, it's because they weren't really looking at all the things that were pinning them down, that were holding them down, that they were carrying along with them. And when we could, when I could have a conversation with them where they would start to identify those things would radically improve. And so just the admission that there's this stuff going on often helps like people figure out what to do moving forward. And once you've written those things down, you get perspective and say, wait, there's some stuff here I can change immediately. Like I can change this now. And now that I've admitted that, I feel like I'm too heavy or I'm too light, well, I'm going to change my diet. And there's a lot more motivation to do that now. I realize that I have this relationship in my life that every time I hang out with this person, maybe not significant other relationship, but I have this relationship that every time I hang out with this person, I'm frustrated for a few days. Like I didn't even realize it until I started writing it down, and I thought this was somebody I really liked hanging out with, but maybe it's motivating in a way that isn't really moving me forward anymore. And, there's stuff in my business that I really can't stand. Like I don't feel right about, and I'm frustrated with doing. And Ajit, like it can be something like every time I come in my house, I've got a broken light switch. I think as entrepreneurs, it's like, the broken window theory, that if you're in a city where there's broken windows, things just go in the wrong direction. If we're putting up with little things and big things, all of those things add up to this level of pressure and noise. I've literally had people say things like, I left your event and I had this whole huge list of things to do. And the next morning I had an electrician come out and put a new light switch in my office and I feel so much better now. And it's because again, we don't look at the things that are bothering us. And I think taking an inventory of those things can be incredibly revealing for an entrepreneur.
That is so powerful. I mean, I can already see that working. As entrepreneurs, while we navigate our energy, we fill our tanks up by being more sensitive, by taking things away or things that are blocking us. One of the things that you mentioned was to keep momentum, right? And that was to take away. You use specific words, but basically it was to take away challenges that are on the way.
Yeah, the pressure and noise.
And noise. Yes, pressure and noise. So we just talked about people. What are some other pressures and noise that you've seen commonly come up in people's entrepreneurial journey?
Oh, I think a lot of it is the lack of understanding of what is bothering you. When you say like, what are the common things that I see in people's entrepreneurial journey, is that, there's commonalities, I think, for everyone. There's the noise of having to put up with people you don't want to be around. There's a lot of judgment. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a commonality that we feel judged. We don't feel seen. Oftentimes we don't feel seen by our family, or we don't feel seen by the people around us. The day you become an entrepreneur is the day you become a commodity. It's interesting. It still happens. If somebody goes on Facebook and they make a post that says, hey, I'm starting next week with this new company and here's my position, you get like 200 comments. Somebody says, hey, I'm quitting my job and I'm starting a business. You see comments like, are you okay? Have you told your parents? Like, is everything, like being an entrepreneur in and of itself creates massive judgment. And I think that's one of the commonalities that almost every entrepreneur has felt at some time in their career, is that they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, they don't feel like the people around them really understand and get them. But when you say, like, there's just something common, I think the biggest thing is the denial of the discomfort that we're feeling. And the biggest thing is not just the denial, but the acceptance of discomfort, because we feel like it's going to create success. And I think when we consciously figure out what it is that's frustrating us, what it is that's bothering us, where's the pressure and noise coming from, we can say, like, okay, well, this part of my business where I really don't like being on sales calls, well, for right now, I have to be on sales calls. But now my goal is, how big can I get this business to where I can hire somebody to do sales? And so it's not like we can eliminate all of it. But then oftentimes too, when we write down the stuff that we don't like, there's things that we say, man, like, I don't even know why I'm doing this anymore. And so, I think the commonality is that we have been conditioned by previous periods of our lives to put up with things. And rarely does somebody say, time out. What are you putting up with? What are you tolerating? What are you allowing in your life that you don't really want to be there? Because like I said, if you have a boat carrying a ton of ballast and you have a big enough engine, you can get it out of the water, but it's going to take a long time. You jettison all the baggage and that boat pops right up out of the water by itself. And so, the other way to achieve your goals, rather than just aiming for something huge, is to say, what do I get out of my life right now? When I'm working with somebody who's in that entry level space, when I'm working with somebody who's starting out, we look at things like, do you have a morning routine? Do you have, like, are you taking care of yourself? Do you have a process that you go through each day to make sure that you're doing the right things? Do you have a way of setting outcomes and goals and achieving those outcomes and goals? Do you have a daily planning system? How grounded are you? Are you, participating in any type of a meditation practice or self-care practice? And I think that there's this dogma in the entrepreneurial space that you have to sacrifice everything in order to create success. And I'm not going to say there's not sacrifice in being an entrepreneur. There absolutely is. But when you're in that entry level sub $100,000 space, to me, it's those personal routines, personal habits, the way that you personally conduct yourself and take care of yourself that give you the capacity to do the things that may be a heavy lift.
It's almost like if you're going to pour out of your cup, fill your cup first.
100%.
First thing in the morning.
Yeah.
One thing that you talked about that I think is, again, not talked enough is decision fatigue.
Decision-making fatigue.
Yeah. Decision-making fatigue. It's at least my understanding of what you said, and maybe you can explain a little bit more. Because I think that's one of those things that is so important for an entrepreneur, and very few people think about.
Yeah.
How many decisions and quality of decisions that they're making on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And it kind of also leans into the example of Steve Jobs that you're talking about, having a uniform.
Yeah.
Tell us more about what is decision fatigue and what should one be mindful of?
Yeah. So, the brain burns more energy than any other part of our body. And when there's research, studies and research and so much out there on when we have to make a series of difficult decisions, our decision-making capability actually degrades, and our likelihood of making decisions that we will not be happy with later actually goes up. Let me give you an example. So if somebody gets up in the morning and they're in a place where they want to be in better shape, and so they're eating nothing but healthy foods, then getting up in the morning first thing, you're probably not going to be challenged by, I need to go get a cheeseburger. But if you get up in the morning and there's challenges with the kids and you're making decisions on how to deal with them, and you don't have a morning routine, so the morning's haphazard and you're throwing things together, you're leaving the house late for the 5th time in a 5-day week, you get your kids to school late, you get to work late, you're behind on things, and all day you're in this constant treading water. By the time 3:30 rolls around and you're out on a sales call or you're out doing something and you pass the fast food place, your brain is going to make it a lot easier for you to go do something that you're not going to be happy with later. And so the more that we set ourselves up for success in advance, the more that we eliminate that decision-making fatigue by creating a process through which we support ourselves, we'll make more consistently good decisions. And I think a lot of people, I know a lot of people say things like, oh, I just have a hard time keeping in shape, or I have a hard time not eating these foods. Or, I think for a lot of the time it's, well, here's what's happened. You're allowing your decision-making capacity to be burned out so quickly that your mind is in a place where it's just looking for pleasure. It gives up discipline. It gives up any type of outcomes that you have, and it says, how do I just feel better right now?
Mm.
And so when we understand that decision making fatigue is a real thing, and when we know, or when we allow for that understanding to drive us to say, okay, how do I eliminate the decisions in the morning? I'm going to put together a morning routine. I'm going to get up in the morning, do the same things that I know will support me. And by the way, I think it's also become cool in the entrepreneurial world to say you don't need a morning routine, or you don't need to have a routine. You need to be in flow. You need to be doing this. The fact is like, flow doesn't happen in most people's lives unless they have a process to get there, unless they actually clear out the noise and the pressure to get there. And so I think, it might not be the sexiest answer, but man, in my experience, when I've been able to work with people and have had them put together a morning routine, simple, like write it down and go through the checklist, and they've eliminated decision making in advance, suddenly all the stuff in their business gets easier, and they start making way more progress in the things that are really important to them, and they start making better decisions.
That is so true. Do you think, why is it becoming cool? I didn't know that it was even cool to not have, because I always thought flow is generated in a way.
100%.
And that's what, if
It's
you
set up.
Yeah, and if you listen to anyone or watch anyone that is a high performer who's in a state of flow, or seems like they must be in a state of flow, they have everything set almost like it's rhythmic. It's like, yep, this is what I do. Then and then around this time is when I say, all right, I'm done. And then it is open to whatever happens. But I've already gotten my thing done. My flow is already taken care of, especially with writers. At least all the successful writers are just amazed at how scheduled they are. They're like, I wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning and I write for these many hours. My coffee is ready. This is ready. And I go for until this time. Then I take a walk or have my lunch, and then I come back and I do da. And then after that, every email or whatever else is there in the world is after like 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock. Something when their day is kind of done, but world is still catching up to them. So it's, where is that coming from, according to you, this new narrative?
I don't know, Ajit. I think it's very similar to the narrative that you should just get up and work every day. Like, don't even think about anything, just go straight to your desk. I think
the hustle culture,
but it's almost like this heroic hustle culture. I can work harder than you. I can work longer than you. I don't need any support. I can do it on my own. That there's like this badge of honor that a lot of entrepreneurs have to, like, I don't do any of that stuff, and I've still created this massive level of success. And
financial success, mostly. It is not really success.
100%. And a lot of the time it is financial success. And it's financial success that what you're not seeing on the other side of that equation, and I've seen, because I'm in the room, I've had the conversations with people of like, I have $10 million in the bank and I feel the same as when I didn't have any money. And I don't feel like I've really changed things in my life at all. And I'm still running every day, and I'm still frustrated every day. I'm still angry every day. And I think that a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we look for excuses to validate the way we're behaving and to make it okay the way we're behaving. And I think being caught up in that constant state of hustle is an adrenaline addiction that a lot of people have, that they don't want to face and say, like, why am I doing it this way? Why am I beating myself up on a daily basis? Why do I feel like I have to create all this massive pressure for myself? And so I think that there's a lot of really well-known people out there who have become well-known by demonstrating day to day that hustle culture on social media and in videos that they do. And like, I work all day, every day. I have 16-hour days, 5 days this week. I'm not saying that sometimes you don't have to do that as an entrepreneur, but when that becomes a lifestyle, there's a reason. You're avoiding something. You're masking what is really going on for you in this, I'm going to focus on something else all day, every day. I hesitate to say this because it's a long discussion to get into, but for a lot of those entrepreneurs, there have been traumatic events in their lives that they are masking through myopic focus and through overwhelming themselves on a daily basis. And to the incoming entrepreneur who's like, how do I get this done? It looks cool. It's like, hey, they can do it. I can do it too.
It's the hero story. It's like the hero, the savior. I want to be like the hero and the savior without understanding what it actually means.
I mean, I got caught up in it when I was in my 20s. I ran a manufacturer's rep firm. I was always the youngest kid in the room, or youngest person in the room. We were very, very successful, but I had read an article that said Bill Gates, in order to build Microsoft, had never taken a day off in his 20s. And it's funny that these days people don't even like associate Bill Gates with Microsoft, but this was back in when I was coming up. And Gates was one of those entrepreneurial icons because in his early 20s, he was running this massive company called Microsoft. And I read this article that said he never took a day off in his 20s. He worked 7 days a week, never took a day off. That was the discipline that it took to build this multi-billion-dollar multinational company. And I remember reading it and thinking, oh, that's how you do it. And so I did the same thing. And by the time I was in my early 30s, I was almost 300 pounds. I had a bleeding ulcer. Now they call it Crohn's or colitis or IBS or something like that. But back then it was called a bleeding ulcer. I was on 3 or 4 different medications. I was in a place of reactivity and lack of sensitivity that was just completely over the top. And a lot of that was due to me not really understanding that I was being driven by a lot of circumstances that were earlier in my life. You know, I was traumatized when I was a kid. I was bullied. I was always the odd man out. And so as soon as I got into business and I found a place where like, hey, I can actually succeed, I was going to succeed no matter what. And I would sacrifice everything in order to be able to be the guy in the room who had the highest sales or who got the award or who got the new contract. And once I realized where a lot of that stuff was coming from, you know, I started going to EMDR therapy. I got into a lot better shape. I had fears of, if I do these things, am I going to lose my edge? And here's what really happened was I did those things and my motivation came from a different place. And rather than losing my edge, I created success on an entirely different level than I had before. I think a lot of times people say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm just going to do everything that it takes to run this business and nothing else. But if you're not getting up in the morning and taking care of yourself, if you're not taking walks, if you're not meditating, and I know that like meditation is almost a bad word in the entrepreneurial space because everybody's like, I can't. It just means sitting there for a few minutes with your eyes closed, breathing and letting your brain process. It doesn't mean that it has to be blank. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you sit there and your mind is racing, that's exactly what it needs to be doing. If you're, you know, how doing those things is going to help you increase the ability to see what you really want to do. And my pointer would be to avoid this hustle and succeed at all costs dogma and environment that's out there, because yes, there's people who are going to be on stage at events who say, I sacrificed everything and now I have a multi-million-dollar business. But I've seen behind the curtains on those people, and they're usually cleaning up a huge mess and trying to reconcile why they don't feel like they're actually successful unless they're on stage talking about it. Mm-hmm. And so protect yourself, protect your sensitivity. Don't lean into this, I need to sacrifice everything. Will there be sacrifices? Of course there will. But the more you take care of yourself, the more you lower the pressure and noise in your life, the unnecessary pressure and noise, you'll be able to do the things that you need to do to actually be successful.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Alex, for all that amazing advice, those questions, those the patterns that we will be rethinking about. Thank you so much, Alex, for taking the time. It's been a pleasure.